And welcome back to another podcast with Mr. Hagan. On this podcast, we're going to finish up with some solutions. Actually, I'm only going to talk about one solution for the problems that are created by monopoly. There's many solutions, but I'm just going to mention one of them and talk about it briefly today. So first of all, let's just restate the problem. What is the problem created by a monopolist? The problem created by a monopolist is they are allocatively inefficient and they are productively inefficient. So what do those terms mean? Just a review of those, and you can go watch some previous videos that I've done on this playlist that talk about allocative and productive inefficiencies. But let's just say very quickly what it means to be allocatively inefficient. What that means is that the firm will fail to produce the amount of the good that is desired by society. In the fancy language of economics, the firm will underproduce relative to the social optimum. Okay, and what that just means in everyday language is the firm will produce less than what the consumer wants. And why would they do that? They'll do that so that they can push up the price on their product. And then number two, they are productively inefficient. And what does that mean? That means that they will fail to minimize average total cost. They will fail to minimize average total cost. So they will produce less of the good than what is desired by society, and they will do it at some cost level that is some cost level other than the minimum cost level. They'll do it at too high of a cost and too little of the good. So let's restate the efficiency problem. The efficiency problem says that now I have this wrong here, so let's just fix this. They will not overproduce the good. They'll do exactly the opposite. Okay, they're not going to overproduce the good. The firm will, I don't know if I can fit this in here, underproduce the good. Okay, there will be underproduction relative to social optimum, and they will fail to minimize costs. That's the problem created by a monopolist. So what can we do to fix this problem? There are several possible solutions, but we're going to just look at one of them. Now, I just want to mention when we say this that you always have to remember that any public policy solution is always going to create new problems. There is no such thing as a free lunch. There's always a cost. Okay? So every solution creates a new set of problems, and I'll mention that briefly at the end. So first of all, what is a trust? Well, I'm not going to get into on this video. Maybe I can make another video sometime in the future and talk a little bit more about trust. But for now, what a trust means is just a very large company that has a lot of market power. Okay? It's a very large company or kind of a group of companies that have a lot of market power. So to deal with this, these very large companies that have a large amount of power in the market, the idea is that they would cut production to raise prices and, make the consumers worse off. And so what could we do to solve that problem? Well, we could solve that problem if we could increase competition again. And the way that we do this, one of the ways that we do this in the United States is by using what are called antitrust laws. So you can think of that as saying, anti-monopoly laws, anti-really big company laws. You could think about it that way. And the first one that gets passed is the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1890. And the Sherman Antitrust Act, the goal of it was to reduce the power of trusts. Adding to that was the Clayton Antitrust Act in 1914, and that's going to strengthen the government's power to enforce this law. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details. Lots of details that we could go into. These are not the only two antitrust laws. There are many other ones. We're just doing very basics here. So the government comes in with passes these antitrust laws, gives them the power to reduce the power of the trust, and it's going to give the government some strength or power to enforce that law. So what does this look like? Well, number one is the government, under this antitrust legislation, they can prevent mergers. So if these two companies over here want to join together, the government could say, no, if you join together, you're going to become too powerful in the marketplace. You're going to become too much like a monopolist, and then you're going to underproduce the good and fail to minimize costs. So the government could just say, we say no. These two companies, if they want to merge, they have to go to the government for permission, and the government could say, nope, prevent that merger. We're going to prevent those two companies from merging together. We need them to continue to compete against each other. The second thing is that if a company already exists and is a monopolist or too large or has too much economic power, the government could actually come in and split the company up. And this has happened a couple times in United States history. I have one of them here. AT&T in 1984 was split up by the government into what became known as the Baby Bells. And this has happened before that. This also happened famously, I think it was in 1911, when the federal government or they split up Standard Oil of New Jersey. That was Rockefeller's company. I think that was 1911. So the government could split up companies if they think they're too big, if they're acting like a monopolist. And then number 3 is the government can prevent companies from coordinating to reduce competition. So, if you have a bunch of, pretty big companies, but none of them are monopoly in and of themselves, these couple 3 or 4 big companies might get together and coordinate. They might say, okay, we're going to secretly agree to act like a monopolist, and we're going to reduce competition between ourselves. We're going to cut production and increase prices. Okay? And that's illegal. Now, that can be, it's illegal under the antitrust legislation. That can be hard to prove. Okay? You have to prove that companies are secretly agreeing to cut production and raise prices. So these 3 things are kind of the 3 main tools that the government has, that the government can do under this antitrust legislation: prevent mergers, split up companies that get too big, prevent companies from coordinating to reduce competition, making secret agreements to drive up prices. All of these things are designed to reduce market power, to reduce their monopoly power, and make all these companies act more like they're in a competitive market. That's kind of the goal of it all. And if they do that, then these companies will no longer be underproducing and failing to minimize average total costs if you can create competition. But if they continue to act like monopolists, then they will underproduce and they will fail to minimize average total costs. So, prevent mergers, split up companies, prevent companies from coordinating to reduce competition. Now, there is a problem with this. As I said back here, there's always a cost. There's always some new problem that you create. And the new problem that you create is if you break up these companies, these big companies, you're going to lose efficiency, because big companies often enjoy efficiencies from economies of scale. Economies of scale, you can watch a previous video of mine on economies of scale, but economies of scale can allow companies to produce at very high levels and drive down their average total costs. Well, if you break up big companies, then they're not going to enjoy economies of scale and be able to drive down their average total costs as much. So I'm not saying, whether or not we should break up companies or not under antitrust legislation. I'm just saying that if you do break up these companies, you are going to lose some efficiency. Okay? So that's going to be your trade-off. So let me just say that all one more time. What's the problem with a monopolist? Problem with a monopolist, they will underproduce relative to the social optimum. They will fail to minimize costs. What do we do about it? Antitrust legislation here and here that are going to prevent mergers, split up companies that are too big, prevent them from coordinating to reduce competition, but we will lose efficiency in the process of doing so. All right, this has been another Econ video with Mr. Hagan. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you on the next Econ podcast.